This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun, but the real star of today's show is rFactor 2. Now, today's show is going to be a little bit different. This is not a review. It's not a preview. It's not a tutorial or a school video. And it's not really a race video, but we do have some racing here today to talk about. But this is really me getting back to rFactor 2. And it's been out for a couple of years. And in a couple of years, we've seen a lot of refinements in the sim, a lot of updates and corrections, bug fixes, community input that has allowed it to get better, modding input, new cars, tracks being built by the community, and more additional content coming from ISI. And then on top of that, you've got the backing and the input coming now from Studio 397, who have joined forces with them. All this coming together, the addition of DirectX 11, and how much more the developers can do with the sim running on DirectX 11 versus DirectX 9. All of these changes getting us to that point where rFactor 2 is really starting to get good. When I think back in time, all the way back to 2006 when rFactor came out, in its beginning stage, it was so light in content. It was in so much need of some updates from the developers themselves that I actually played it for a while and then shelved it. And it was a couple of years later that I actually went back to the sim. ISI had continued to develop and work on the sim. The modding community had gotten involved and started adding more cars and tracks and add-ons to the game, making it better and better with each generation of it. And a couple of years later, it got to the point where it was the go-to sim. I played it for years. It was the sim of sims, and you could do anything you wanted in rFactor, and it was just so great. Well, rFactor 2 is on a similar learning or growth curve where they're waiting, getting development, making changes and fixes from both of those teams now, ISI and Studio 397, getting more input from the community, getting that modding effort from the community to the point where it's really starting to get good. So it's been a while since I'd been there, and I got an email from Christopher Elliott of the Studio 397/ISI team, and he invited me to do a media event that they had going on with the introduction of the new Radical SR3. And this has always been one of my favorite cars and sims. I've driven it in a bunch of different sims over the years, but now it's going to be an rFactor 2, and it's content coming directly from that team, not even from the modding community. So I figured this is a great chance to get back to rFactor 2. I had to go back onto Steam, get it there, because the last time I did it was pre-Steam build, pre-397. I had to update everything, get it going, get all my controls set. So this is like me really getting into it for the first time. Once I did, I got the mod from them, just minutes to spare before the actual event, so I was going to have no prep time driving the car. Didn't know what track we were going to be at either, so I literally joined the server with the car I had just downloaded, and then found out we were going to be at Silverstone International, a track that I might know. I don't know if I've driven that exact layout before, certainly not in rFactor 2. I was going to get 15 minutes of practice, 15 minutes of qualifying, and then thrown right into a 20-minute race. And that's the kind of thing that I don't mind doing, and I do have a vague familiarity with the car and track combo, so it was just a matter of getting in, getting acclimated to rFactor 2, getting comfortable, and getting going. Well, then I saw the list of drivers in the names in the room, and I thought, I have brought a knife to a gunfight. This isn't just media, guys. I'm looking at Alexi Aloma, just to throw out one name. This guy finished in the top 5 in the Visa Vegas race, and I'm now in the same race with this guy. That's not a good combination, and I have no time, no prep, no setup, no anything. But that's not what I was here for. It wasn't about racing, except we were going to run this race. It was really about getting back to rFactor 2, feeling this new car that they're coming out with that, again, the Radical is such a fun car to drive. It gives you that on-the-edge feeling like a Formula 1 car. It's got some power, it's got some incredible handling. And at the same time, it's got that open wheel feeling because you've got an open cockpit. And then at the same time, it's got that full-bodied feel about it because it is a big, heavy car. So instead of being on that razor's edge where one mistake and you've crashed, you do have a little room for error. You can lock up the brakes a little bit. You can put it sideways a little bit. It is a fun car to drive. I mean, if you don't know the Radical, it's actually a purpose-built track car. They do race them. I'm not going to say they don't race them, but it was built for the guys who just want to have a car, take from track to track, and get great performance out of it. But in sim racing, it's become a go-to car for fun, and that's exactly what this race here was all about. So we did qualifying. I was at the back of the grid, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the racing other than I've shown some of it already, but I worked my way up through the grid a little bit. Each lap I was getting faster, getting more comfortable with the physics, getting more comfortable with the force feedback feeling of rFactor 2. And after a few laps of qualifying, practice, and into the race, I was really starting to get comfortable, getting a really good feel for that car, really getting immersed in the situation and getting to feel the fun of the Radical SR3. So as I said, I started picking up spots. And then all of a sudden I'd see a car blown up on the side of the road. And then another car blown up on the side of the road.
Why is everybody's cars catching on fire?
And after a few more laps, all of a sudden I found myself into the top 10, and I'm kind of thinking, what's going on? I mean, I knew I was going to pick up some spots as I gained speed, but I'm running up in the territory of some very, very fast drivers, only to find out that people are still dropping. Next thing you know, I'm in 6th place. I'm thinking, I could win this thing. Well, as it turns out, my car would blow up as well.
Oh, there goes mine.
So there was one little bug in the car that they did find out and warned us about, and it turns out that they're revving way beyond their 8,700 RPM limit, and we are all blowing up our engines by running them thousands of RPMs higher than that. Except for Will Stark, who did manage to keep his car running all the way to the finish line and win the race. And just to give you an idea, I think he's the only car that finished. 3rd place car is actually stuck on the front stretch about 100 yards from the finish line. So that is how the first race ended. It was a lot of fun, some great door-to-door, wheel-to-wheel racing. It is a fun car, and it was a good feel as well, which is very important, and something that I think has improved with rFactor over time, rFactor 2 I should say. So then we were going to move on to the second race with an inverted grid. At least the top 10 I think started at the back. I think I started in like 18th of 22, I don't remember exactly. But we were going to do a 10-minute race, and we were warned to keep the revs lower. So in this race, we actually ended up going, I would get past because I'm trying to keep it at 8,700, but then you want to get greedy. You don't want to get past, you want to go into that 9,000-10,000 range, but then you're risking grenading the motor. So I kept things as cool as I possibly could, stayed within my boundaries, did pick up a few spots, don't know exactly where I was finishing, but in the end, I ended up having what I thought was maybe brake failure. I almost went off the corner. I did go off the corner. I thought, was that the brakes or was that me? Well, it was the brakes, because the very next corner, I drove off the corner again, and I knew it wasn't me this time. It was the brakes failing, which is another cool feature going on with this sim. They had actually done a mechanical failure time lapse, I guess we'll call it. They had condensed the time, so you're going to get more failures in a shorter amount of time, and that made things very interesting. A lot of guys were still having failures, but this time they're on the brakes. So all in all, it was a very fun event. It was a fun car to drive, and it was a good excuse for me to get back to rFactor 2, which coming in the near future, I'm definitely going to have to keep my eye on a lot more. We're getting to that point where it's really starting to get good. You're getting that added development with the 2 studios joining forces. You're getting that update to DirectX 11. You're getting a bunch of new content coming from that team. Game content like cars, tracks, and more updates to the sim. And then on top of that, the modding community is always working away as well. So back in the day, and I'm going to date myself here, there was a company named Paul Masson Wine, and they had an advertising campaign that would say,
"We will sell no wine before it's time."
And their thinking, or what they were saying, is that with good wine, you have to age it. It takes time before it's really ready to be uncorked and drunk. Well, in the case of some sims, maybe we're in the same sort of thing, where it takes some time. You have to age the sim a little bit. A lot of sims, when they come new in the bottle or in the box, they actually need some time to cure, to ripen, or whatever you call it, to get to that point where they're really ready to be opened and drunk. And I think rFactor 2 is getting to that point now. It's about ready to start looking at that bottle and think it's time to pull the cork and take a sip. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick demo of the new Radical SR3 by the rFactor ISI Studio 397 team. I know the show's been a little bit different. I just did it off my hip, coming off of the event. Just wanted to talk about it a little bit and really let you know it's time to start looking at rFactor 2 again. So this is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.